Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me the legendary Dean Yeagle, who is an American animator and cartoonist and has done almost practically everything in the art field. So, welcome to the show. I am very excited to have you on.
Thank you.
So obviously there is so much to talk about, but I think the best place to start is with how you got into animation and where did that all start, because it is super interesting. And as I stated, I think everybody knows your work, and we're going to talk about some of it, what they know you for and what they possibly don't know you for yet, but they're going to fall in love with it.
All right. Well, I started when I was 19, and I was going to art school in Philadelphia. And for the summer, I got a job at a small animation company called Animation Arts Associates, and in Philadelphia. And they did little local commercials. They did stuff for the Navy and all kinds of things, and some very interesting people, and people that I learned a lot from at that little studio. And I recommend that kind of start because with a small company like that, you get to do a little bit of everything. I did character design and animation and storyboards and layouts and ink and paint and a little bit of everything. Whatever they needed done, they'd give me a shot at. So that was a good way to start.
And to even go further, because what was the animation scene like that? Because I know that Disney happened earlier on, and then obviously I come at the animation side because I'm a big anime fan. And I know Osamu Tezuka did a lot of cool stuff. And then American animation, because I don't know if this was the golden age, but I feel like this was more like the silver bronze age of animation. And where that was
the tarnished gold age, I guess you'd call it. It was after, well, Disney died while I was in my first year of working at that studio. I quit art school because I realized I was learning animation from this studio. Everything was there in one little office space that I could possibly learn, and they had. I remember one of the guys had he had 16 millimeter prints of 101 Dalmatians and Snow White. So I would sit there at the editing desk and I would run through it frame by frame, and we'd just look at these wonderful things, that I'd always loved. And I should say that 101 Dalmatians came out when I knew that that's what I had to do. It was 1961. And I had always thought that was what I wanted to do from the days that I watched the old Disney TV show. And when I was about 8, they had a show on that Lady and the Tramp was going to come out. And they had a show on about animation. And they had animators on, and they had pencil tests and so forth. And that was when I really realized at the age of 8 that human beings actually did those animated movies. And it wasn't just some magic that appeared. It was actually done. People had to draw them. And, it sounded like something well worth doing. So, and when I was 14, my parents drove me out to California, where I am now, but we were still in Philadelphia, of course. And I got a studio tour at Disney's. I actually saw Walt Disney's 1961 silver Thunderbird sitting in the parking lot, but he didn't happen to come by while we were at the studio. But we got this wonderful tour through a relative who had gone to school with one of the storymen there, and it was great. And I got to go into the personnel office, and I had a portfolio, and I asked the guy, well, he asked me, so what are you here for? And I said, well, I just want to see what you need, what I have to do to work here. And he said, basically, well, don't be 14. And so I said, I can do that eventually. And that's where it started. But, it was magic to me. It's hard to tell you what that studio tour did for me.
The saying is that most people in life do not find what they're good at, and then even if you do find out what you're good at, most people in life do not get to live it, and very few people do. And it seems that you knew right away, and then you fell in perfectly into animation, and that's what you wanted to do. And it's very, very cool, and it's very special when that happens. And obviously, a bunch of things definitely influenced you and caught your eye, and you caught the bug, and it had to happen for you. And in that way, it's very cool. And I think when people are going to hear this and they're watching right now, they immediately get that. And because it is special to that degree when that happens.
Well, that's why when people ask me how to get in, how to get to do what I've done and so forth, I can't really tell them much because it was pure stupid luck the whole time. And the part of the stupid luck was that I knew that's what I had to do, and it didn't occur to me that I wouldn't be able to do it. That's one of the things that you have to work for it. You have to keep drawing. You have to do whatever it takes. I had a book. Wait a minute. I had this book, Animation by Preston Blair, a little Walter Foster book, a little cheap book, but wonderful book that came out when I was, I don't know how old, but a kid. And I used it to learn animation from up to a point. I also got a Disney animation kit that came out at the time. It gave you a little disc and books on how to draw Mickey and Donald and Goofy and Pluto. And so I had that to go by too. And at one point, I decided to take, I don't know if they still have these things or not, but there used to be a couple of different companies about learning illustration. And they would have a little ad in a paper or a magazine that would have a drawing of a pirate or a turtle or something. And you would draw that and send it to them, and then they'd send somebody out to sucker you into, the course. I shouldn't say that because it really had some nice stuff with it too. But the guy came to our house and he said, what course do you want? We have illustration, we have fine arts, we have painting, we have this and that. And he said, I said, you have cartooning? And he said, yes. But we don't recommend that because it's not easy to get to be a cartoonist. And if you shoot for becoming a cartoonist, it's very unlikely. And I said, well, that's all right. That's what I'm going to shoot for anyway. So that's the one I want. So I took that course, and whether it helped me or not, I don't know. But mostly it was just watching those movies and studying them as much as possible. Eventually I got 8mm chunks of the various animations, some shorts and some pieces from the features. And so those I could watch frame by frame by myself. This was all before I found that job. And that's basically how I started and why I didn't give up, because it never occurred to me.
And I love the fact that you came into it, as I stated, you fell into it pure, somewhat luck. I also think the skill was there in a lot of ways, as well as hard work. And then fast forward, you also landed yourself in Zander's animation parlor, working for Jack Zander, who did some animation for MGM with Tom and Jerry. And so how did that come about? Because that opened up a whole bunch of opportunities for you as well that we're going to get into. But even getting to work in another animation parlor that had a list of clients and had a large list of clients, and there's a lot of work to be done in that production.
Well, Jack Zander, he started this company, and it may well have been the very first one that was just dedicated to doing TV commercials and so forth. It was in New York City, and it had been in business for some time by the time I got there. And I went to New York because I knew that they had more serious animation than Philadelphia did. And I knew of Jack Zander once I heard who was running this company. What happened really was that I went into Howard Beckerman's studio. If you don't know who Howard Beckerman was, he did a lot of animation for a lot of people at the time, and he did magazine articles in Film Comment magazine, if I'm remembering that right, and about animation. And I was aware of that, and he was the only name in New York that I really knew. So I went to his studio, and he didn't have anything to offer me to, no jobs, but he was kind enough to give me everybody's name in the entire city that I should go see. And it was just a wonderful thing. And I went to all those studios, and there were quite a few in New York at those days. And I went to most of them. Most of them didn't have anything going at the time. They were all, very nice, looked at my stuff. And when I went to see Jack, he had just lost a designer, and he looked at my stuff and he said, "Oh, okay, we'll hire you as a designer." And okay, great. And he offered me, if I'm not mistaken, $350 a week, which I thought was about as much money as anybody could possibly need to live on forever. And so I took the job. I was still living in Philadelphia with my wife and my new baby, who had been born that year. And so I took the train to New York every morning until I realized, well, okay, I'm going to stay here. So we ought to move to New York. And so that's what we did. We moved to excuse me, Westchester County, and we lived there and took the train in every morning to New York. And then I progressed at that job from design to doing animation. I already had done some animation. I had a reel to show him. So he let me do animation. He let me do storyboards. Again, it was like working for this other small company. It was a bigger small company, but he did an awful lot of stuff, commercials for all kinds of people all over the country. And he was one of the major producers of commercials. So I did stuff on all sorts of commercials. I became a director there eventually. And in 1981, first of all, I have to put this in. I designed the Cheerios bee. There he is.
We were going to get to that. But I do need to make it clear. I grew up in Westchester growing up. I grew up in Yorktown. So I'm very familiar with Westchester, White Plains, all over the place. It's an easy commute to New York, so clearly much easier than Philadelphia. I can assure you that, everybody. I can assure you that.
Yeah, it was a good place. A good place to live. And I just stayed with Jack for 7 years, and then I decided I would like to just freelance. And I would still work for Jack, but I'd do it from home. We had a house that it was actually a 3-story house in Portchester, New York. And I worked on the 3rd floor. There were 2 nice big rooms. It was not an attic, it was actual rooms. An old house that had room for the maids up on the 3rd floor, actually. And that was my studio. And so I worked there. Then I formed a company in 1986 with Nancy Beeman, who is should be a well-known name to people in animation. I worked with her and also Darryl Cagle, whose idea it was to start the studio in the first place. And Darryl is now a political cartoonist, and he runs sites for collecting political cartoons that are out, and he puts them out on online. But he quit fairly soon when he realized that the animation wasn't just a quick way to get into the thing. It took a long time to work it out, and he figured he'd better just do something that he could make some money at. And Nancy, I worked with her. She had worked with me at Zander's. She was the first graduate of the Disney's animation department school, Cal Arts. And she hadn't even graduated yet when she came, and Jack looked at her stuff, and he said, "Okay, you're hired." And she said, I can't be hired. I haven't finished school yet. And he said, "You don't need to finish school." And which is another thing I should say, that nobody ever asked me in my life what school I had gone to, if I had any animation knowledge from school or not. They just looked at my stuff. And you have to have a reel, you have to have a portfolio. And that was basically Nancy's story. So Jack called up the school and said, give this girl let her loose, basically. And so she started to work there, and then we formed the studio, and we did commercials. And
so before we get into the studio, we do have to talk about the Honey Nut Cheerios bee, because everybody wants to know all about that. And what I want to know is, how did that all come about? And then obviously that bee has lasted for almost as long as your career has lasted, which is crazy when you think about it. And it has like a NASCAR car. Everybody in the world knows it. Yeah. And when I said like everybody knows your work, everybody knows your work, in which said all 350 people in America know the Honey Nut Cheerio bee. Whether they know it's the Honey Nut Cheerio bee or not is not the question. They recognize it, and it's brilliant branding, and it's one of the greatest logos and mascots of all time. And what is that like for you, knowing that you designed something that has lasted so long? Because it is rare now. Companies change their logos all the time. They change their mascot, and the Honey Nut Cheerio bee has been relatively the same since its inception. So what is that like for you? And it'll last beyond your life and probably mine too at this point. And I'm significantly younger. I'm 28, and I'm willing to put money on that position. So obviously it's now far exceeded probably what anybody could ever expect.
Well, it started out that they needed a drawing of a bee. This was when Honey Nut Cheerios were starting. And of course the agency came to us, and Jack said, "Here, draw a bee." So I drew one, and it looked a little more like a bee. It had compound eyes, and it looked a little more insecty, and they didn't care for that, the idea of a real insect floating around in the Cheerios. So eventually I redesigned them and kept going until they liked it. And it was basically Elmer Fudd in a bee suit, more or less a human face. And so I animated some of the spots. Eventually we lost that to some other studios. Everybody in the business at the time and ever since that was doing commercials has worked on that bee at some time. It just hopped around from studio to studio. And it became, of course, CGI at one point. And at one point, he sort of elongated a little bit and got taller and even less bee-like, I should say. But I'm not sure if he's back to the beginning yet, but he looks basically the same. But of course, I was paid for that day's work, and that's it. So don't think that any money has come roaring into me every year. It's that. But I learned at one point that I worked at once we had started our company. Our animation company, and things were a little slow. I went in for 3 days a week to Disney's office in New York. They did games and shirts and toys and so forth. And somebody came in from the studios out here in California and came in and said to the guy who was running this part of the studios, we need somebody to draw a dog from outer space. We're not getting what we want out there for some reason. I don't know who was working on it. But the idea was they were going to do a half-hour special with a dog that comes from outer space, and nobody knows he's from outer space. He can walk on 2 legs and talk and so forth, but only when nobody's watching him. So it sounded like fun. So all of us that were working there at the time, we had an hour to do this. So we all did a drawing, and they picked mine, and it became a TV series, actually, with about 6 dogs. It was called Floppy Dogs. It was at the time when Disney was doing a lot of animated stuff for children's TV. And it became a stuffed toy that came out and so forth. And I was paid for 1 hour's work for that. And that's when I finally realized, this is not right. I'm not going to work for anybody else anymore. I'm going to work for me. I've got my own studio. And when I do that kind of work, designing a character, I will sell the copyright to them, and there will be actual money changing hands. So that's something I recommend. Be sure that and that's always how it worked ever since. I did Kool-Aid packages. I did characters for different commercials. I did that. There you go. And I worked on the Cookie Crisp commercials.
Let's talk about Cookie Crisp, because we might as well encourage kids to eat sugar.
Of course, yes. I felt that the name Cookie Crisp told everybody what it was about. So I didn't feel like I was cheating people or sucking people into something, and they'd say, hey, this has got sugar in it.
Hey, I turned out fine. My parents didn't mind. So there you go.
They were not bad. You put them in a bowl and you put them in the microwave, and they tasted like actual, cookies. But at any rate, they were fun spots to work with. And I did them with my studio. The studio, by the way, was Caged Beagle Productions, because it was in the beginning Kegel, Yeagle, and Beeman. And we mixed them all up together, and it was Caged Beagle. And it still is my company, only my company at this point. Nancy went to work for Disney at one point, and she worked all over the world and became a teacher now. Anyway, I did those commercials for about 8 years with different advertising agencies. Actually, it went from to different agencies, but I kept it. And they were like little sort of, well, they were little cartoons in and of themselves. And so I did a little of everything on those. And I had people work for me. I knew that people at Jack's who would take, some work from me, and assistant animators, and I had ink and paint people. And none of them worked in my studio. My studio was still on the third floor of my house, and so that allowed me to not have a staff to pay, and I could do work where only I was needed, like on designing characters and so forth. So that. That's what happened. The studio, when CGI came in, and there was not much 2D animation being done anymore, I found the CD-ROMs were doing children's books, and so I got into that. So I did a bunch of. It turned out I only needed to do one CD-ROM to make enough money to live for a year. So that worked nicely.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And we said you only had to do one, and that's phenomenal. That's just phenomenal.
And I could hire people to work with me. I could hire other animators and assistants and so forth. So I was.
Well, hopefully people know what a CD-ROM is, because those things are sort of out of date now in a lot of ways.
A CD is, at least. Surely people still know what a CD is. It's like a DVD, which is like a like a CD. But they lasted for a while until sort of everything went online instead, and then they weren't doing that anymore. The commercials, by the way, for the Cookie Crisp. At one point, I went into a meeting of what we were doing, the post-production on one of them, and the agency people were there, and they said, "We're going to do more of these now. We're going to do 6 a year." And I said, "Oh, I won't have to do anything else other than that." But beware when something like that happens, because within a few months, Purina, which owned the cereal, which produced the cereal, Purina Kid Chow, more or less, they sold all their cereals to General Mills. General Mills, and General Mills did all their work, all their animation work in England, in London. So I lost that whole thing at that point. And fortunately, that's when I found the CD-ROMs to work on. And the moral of all this is keep your eyes open as to what's going to happen. Whatever you're doing now might not exist. So just figure out what other things there are to do. And I did a lot of work for agencies. Agencies always needed to work, and eventually I did some work for the Ice Age movies, because they were in Westchester County. They started in Larchmont, which was 10 minutes from me, and then they went to White Plains, and then they went to Greenwich, and now they're gone because Disney bought them and killed them.
So what is that like to get to work on something like Ice Age? Because obviously Ice Age was a big movie, and there was a bunch of stuff that came out of that, and you did some pre-production work on that, but getting to work on a big film and doing some of the stuff that is needed for that side of it, because it's very different than doing a commercial, and it's also cool to some degree when you're working on a bigger project, I would imagine.
Yes, and of course that was CGI at the time. That was computer animated. So that was the first thing I worked on that was computer animated, but I did what they needed was an old-timey guy to come in and work out the characters' mouth movements. It was actually, that was their very first feature. And they had done some shorts before, but they didn't really involve talking. They were silent pantomime things, you know, which were great. But then they needed somebody to work out what the mouth movements would be for each of the characters of these Ice Age creatures. And the Ice Age creatures were drawn by Peter de Sève, one of my favorite artists in the world. He had always been. And so it was great to work with him. And I had to be able to draw like him in order to work out these characters' mouth movements. And so I did that for that first one. And I did it from home. I mean, I came in to the studio every so often, but I didn't work there. As I said, I was only 10 minutes away, so I would come in when needed and show what I'd done, and that was it. And at that same point, I got into Playboy magazine.
Well, we're going to talk about that because that's my favorite magazine. But anyhow,
yeah.
So let's just jump right into that, because obviously then you transition to actually producing a comic and a cartoon called Mandy. And obviously Mandy is a gag comic. It's more of an adult comic. It's got sexual innuendos in it. And it's perfectly suited for Playboy. Obviously, I don't know if you know who I've interviewed, but people like Keith Garvey, E-Bass, Ricky Calorino, and all these people are from the Good Girl era and are all over the place. And there's a few other people that have been on that are also part of that. And my favorite company in the world is Zenescope, which you did a cover for, which we're going to talk about. It's one of my favorite covers out there. So how did that all come about, that you came up with Mandy and then got into Playboy? Because that's sort of a cool thing. And guys, I read it for the articles. I want to make that perfectly clear.
Yes, and the cartoons. It's all right to read it for the cartoons too.
That too, of course. Cartoons, the articles, and then there's something else going on in that.
Yeah. I'm not sure what that is, but at any rate, what happened was that Playboy had started their online presence, and they decided to have a contest where you could win $25,000 if you gave them a piece of animation that they would use on the online. And they sent around a poster basically to every animation studio on the face of the earth, apparently, because they found me. And I knew that to do a piece of animation that was going to win this $25,000 would probably cost $30,000 to do. So I figured I'm not going to even try that, but this will give me a chance to do some drawings like they use as regular gag cartoons. They always had color cartoons, full page ones, and they were basically the only place that ever did full page cartoons. So I sent some in. I did a couple. I did them in color in Photoshop. And I sent 2 of them in, and I got a call from the cartoon editor, Michelle Urey, who had worked with Playboy for 30 years at that point. And she said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Well, you're impossible to get to without going through some odd fluke of nature that allowed me to show this stuff to you, because they never accepted just out of the blue submissions." And so that's when I started, and I worked for them until they stopped having cartoons at all, about 5 years ago or more. And that's where Mandy first appeared. She appeared in one of the. You got that one? Well, that's her, but that's not from Playboy. But the Playboy cartoon. Well, now that's one of the two that I sent.
Yeah. Which gives an idea. It gives an idea of what you sent in and the playfulness of it. And so obviously there's a lot of stuff that appeared. I don't know which one appeared first in Playboy, but there's a bunch of stuff that's out there with Mandy.
That was the first that actually appeared. The first one that I had done that appeared, although I had done a couple after that appeared first. There was one, probably just one, that appeared first because a big book came out of Playboy cartoons, big, thick coffee table book, and it had one of my cartoons in it because I had just started, and that was the one, the first one I had in the magazine was in there. But the one that you showed was the second one that appeared, and that was in 2000, the year 2000.
And so obviously I love the playfulness of this, and I just think it's funny. I like the humor. I think most people find it to be funny. You have a bunch of aliens and, well, a semi-topless woman, you know, being sort of fought after, and some of the aliens might be in and out, and then one of the aliens is sort of just chilling out. And I just think it's funny. I think it's out there, and it just is my type of humor. And this is the day I get demonetized on YouTube. So clearly, here we are.
Good.
Which means I'm a step in the right direction. It means I'm doing something right, but that happens.
Well, it was interesting because I never thought that I was able to do gag cartoons. It's just one image after all. And I was an animator and I needed 1,000 drawings. And I found that you could do 1,000 drawings and be paid once, or you could do one drawing and be paid 1,000 times. And maybe that wasn't such a bad idea. Not the Playboy cartoons as such, but they paid very well, actually. And Hefner saw everything and approved everything. So although I never got to actually meet him, I did get information from him and so forth. And he would just sign the ones that he liked when I sent in. I would send in about 6 roughs, and then he would pick which ones he wanted. And he would pick maybe 3 out of the 6, and then I would do those as finishes. And at one point I must have sent in a dozen, and he picked 3. And I said to Michelle, am I making a mistake here? Should I just send in 6 because he'll pick 3 and not 12 because he'll pick 3? And she said, yes, just send in 6. So I did that. And eventually there's a book out of mine called Melange, and that was done in France. And I was allowed to use a lot of the Playboy cartoons in it. Playboy said, okay. And I also put in some sketches that they had turned down, and they were still in rough form, and those were in the book too. But
and so to even talk about this, because you're sending to Playboy, Playboy has a big circulation, and obviously I made the joke that I read it only for the articles and the cartoons, but Playboy has a long history of launching people's careers, having prolific artists, prolific writers. Some of the best writers in the U.S. have written for Playboy and have gotten their start in Playboy. You know, Joseph Heller, you know, from Catch 22, wrote for Playboy. And so it's this idea, I think Shel Silverstein wrote for Playboy.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's a big deal to be in Playboy. Whether you're a cartoonist, whether you're a writer, or even a photographer to some degree, as well as if you're a model. I mean, it's the top of the top. And obviously, what was that like for you? Because now you just transitioned out of anime. You're in a whole new medium. You're in arguably one of the top magazines of all time. It's got a big circulation. The audience is almost a perfect fit. And now a bunch of people are discovering that, oh snap, the guy who did a lot of this amazing animation, is now also sort of reinventing himself and is at the top of his game. And it's a very cool thing, and I'm sure that you got a bunch of new fans out of it as well.
Yeah, well, actually, it was the first time that anybody got to see who did what I was doing, because you don't sign animation. You do if you get a credit. I had a credit at the end of Ice Age, but for commercials, nobody knows who you are except people in the business. And so people got to see my signature. They got to know my name. I made sure my signature was readable. There's one of the guys that I know very well now is Doug Snade, and he was with them since the very beginning. And but people couldn't read his signature. I was always asked, "Who's that guy? I love his work, and I don't know what it says." I all immediately knew who they meant. What's Doug Snade? So it's important to make sure people can read your signature. But people will walk by if I'm at the San Diego convention, Comic-Con. People would walk by and suddenly stop and say, "I recognize your stuff. Where have I seen your work?" And I'd say, "Playboy," and they'd say, "Oh, yeah, Playboy." So, it's also important in all this stuff, in animation as well as anything you do, basically, and advertising and everything, to have your own style. It has to. You get it from all over the place. All these people that I've loved as cartoonists over the years are in my style, but you mix it up with your own personality and you make it your own. And if people want that, they have to come to you. They can't say, "I just want any cartoon, and so I'll hire somebody who's still in high school to do it." And if they want you, they gotta come to you. They want your style, and that's important for anybody to remember.
And then to even go further off of this, and you sort of teased it that you had a book come out in France. Mandy continued onward outside of Playboy, where there's all these books and there's other things that have been published with Mandy. There's all these statues, and they can be pricey, and a bunch of different companies. I think C.S. Moore did a statue, and they've done a bunch of stuff out of that studio and that artists and that team. And then there's just a bunch of other books, and obviously stuff like this, which is, Mandy's shorts. And I'm not too sure which shorts we're talking about, if it's short stories or her actual shorts, but that's a different discussion completely. Obviously this I want to throw up there, which is one of my favorite images with Mandy.
That's basically the iconic Mandy. They did that very early on, and I've done that. I've even done that as a banner for the conventions, and I've sold it 3 times. The banner, it's 8 feet high. I don't know what people are doing with it, but I've owned that because people recognize that iconic image.
And so what is that like for you to get to do it outside of Playboy and take the fan base you built with Playboy and then continue it and have sketchbooks and have short stories and have pinup books with Mandy and a variety of other things surrounding her and a variety of other products, including statues, because it is very cool that people really like Mandy. They like what you've done with Mandy and that people gravitate towards it. And I think it's the art, I think it's the concept, and I think it's just that you hit a really, really cool niche and what people want. And it's just fun to read as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it started, as I say, she was in one of the cartoons. And if I was going to use her as my character, I couldn't use her in Playboy anymore. So she was only in one Playboy cartoon. Because she was now going to be my copyright. And so I started doing books for the conventions. Everybody at the time was doing sketchbooks, and So I looked back at all the stuff I'd done over the years, and I put together a sketchbook. I thought I had tons of stuff, and I kept looking at it and going, no, no, that's too early. So I was glad to see in doing that I had progressed, you know. So at any rate, I did that, and that sort of started it. And online, people saw her online. I was doing an online thing where that was where I actually started using her as a character. A bunch of cartoonists, we were all giving each other a character to work with for fun online. So I invented her at that point. I called her Mandy. Just somebody in France asked me if I named her Mandy because I'm a man and my initials are DY. That had never occurred to me, but you never know. But so she became well enough known online that people started wanting to see more of her, and I sold these books, and then people wanted to do sculptures of her, and that's what I've been doing for 15 years. Is basically different versions. I also had a couple of shows, gallery shows in Paris. That in Paris they love cartoons, and there are several places that have that specialize in cartoons of various sorts, and they've had people from Pixar and Disney and so forth go, so I had these two wonderful shows in Paris, and that started my doing commissions. I had not if you have a gallery show, you have to have something worth showing in a gallery, and all I had were sketches. The only color that I did usually, except for a few things, and I'd worked on the Muppet magazines and things like that. But in order to do something big in color, I thought, well, I don't paint, so I'll work in colored pencil on nice French pastel paper. And I did big pieces, 20 by 25. And I did those for that show at that gallery. And they sold out on the first day of the show. And I realized, that's something I can do now. So I've been doing that ever since. And I would do them for the shows, for the conventions, and sell them there. Now, because there are no conventions going on for the past year and a half, I've found that people, are writing me more often to get things done because they might have gone to that show and they've got all that money to spend. They need to put it somewhere. So that's what I've been doing for a year and a half. Basically, it's a lot of.
And then to even go further with Mandy, one of the cool things, and I'm going to throw it up here, is this that you got to do, which is Zombies versus Cheerleader. And you want to talk about a cool moment, obviously the French love cartoons, Spain loves cartoons. Obviously, I think France is, the capital of comics that they read, and it's not what are known as American comics or manga, but they love just a variety of different comics. But obviously this is super cool with Mandy, and this is how culturally relevant and iconic Mandy is, that a company that does Zombies vs. Cheerleaders said, hey, we want a Mandy cover. And so what was that like? Because that is a big deal when a company says, hey, we know who Mandy is. We know who you are. We understand this character, and we think our audience is going to understand this too, or we want our audience to know who this is. And I guarantee there's a bunch of people who didn't know who Mandy was who read Zombies vs. Cheerleaders that now do.
Yeah, I've done a couple of others as well. This one I didn't do the color for, but no, it was great. I'd never drawn zombies before. It didn't come up. Although I did do one of Mandy with a zombie for I've done shows in Europe as well, the conventions, a couple of them in France, Angoulême and Saint Malo, which are wonderful places to do. And also I did one in Belgium. So I've got friends and buyers in Belgium and France in particular.
And what is that like to have an international audience? Because it is very cool when you obviously are doing commissions in Paris and you're also having people that are interested in Mandy across the world, because that is a big deal. And obviously the world is a much smaller place now than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And, I am a global entity with this show. I sell globally on eBay, and I've come to the realization that, hey, the world is not that hard to communicate. I'm in Connecticut right now, and you're in California,
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking in real time, and it's super cool in that regards.
Yeah, that's, it's always amazes me that people will find me anew. Everybody can still find me and they've never seen my work before. And I often get people that'll buy everything I've got on the basis of that, which I always thought I always want to say, wait a minute, you sure you would like my stuff that much? You sure you don't want to buy one thing and try it out? But I don't say that, but it's sort of what I would think.
No, it's the best marketing campaign. I absolutely stop my customers, and then they're like, you're wrong, and then they buy more. It's the greatest marketing campaign ever.
Yeah, and it's as you say, it's everywhere. When I've been in France and in Belgium, I've done signings at the comic shops. If you ever go to Paris, you have to hit all the comic shops around Notre Dame. There's a whole bunch on the Rue Dante in Paris, which are just amazing places. So I've done sales there. I have to say this, when I had my show in Paris, the second show that I had in Paris, one of the people that came to it was the father of a woman who ran one of these big comic shops. And I had done a signing at her shop. And she brought her father, who turned out to be a fan of Mandy. And he not only turned out to be a fan of Mandy, he turned out to be the president of the Natural History Museum of Paris. and he invited my wife and I to go, and he would take us on a tour of the National History Museum of Paris, which is one of the great museums of the world. And we went in, we talked to him at his desk, which was owned. You have to know the history of natural history to know the names of the people that sat at that desk. But it was just incredible. I mean, he took us on a 3-hour walk through the place, and then he told me, you know why I like Mandy? And I said, why? She is poetry, he said. And I told that, the work of Bill Stout? Very
little, but you can explain a little bit about it.
Everybody's got to know Bill Stout. But we go to his studio, we have until the pandemic, to figure drawing classes. He hires a model, and we're not classes, but sessions. You just go and we talk, and with a bunch of other people that are in the business in one way or another, usually. And so I told him that, because he's, in addition to being a fantastic, not just a cartoonist, but he does a lot of stuff with dinosaurs, and he's a paleontologist. And so I told him, hey, I was given a tour through the Natural History Museum of Paris, and the president of that museum told me that Mandy was poetry, and he's never let me live that down ever since. So he sends people to my table, my booth in San Diego saying, "Are you the poet?" Said, "Yeah, go to his place and mention poetry to him." So.
So to even talk about that, because I've been afforded an unbelievable amount of opportunities in the last 7 years doing my first show, this show. I'm now working on a, I guess, third show, for lack of a better word here, and the amount of people that I meet and the amount of privileges I get in the comic world because of it are unbelievably amazing. And people do things on books for me that they don't do for other people. People do a lot of cool stuff because I just happen to know a lot of people now. And obviously, this is one of those experiences because you did something and obviously somebody liked it, that it's kind of crazy. And then it's a very small world, this. And so obviously, and also it just goes to show you never know who's reading what. And that a lot of people in a lot of different places across the world love comics and love cartoons. And, breaking the mold here is I think, that story, in my view, is that because you wouldn't expect the head of a major museum in one of the top probably 10 museums in the world to be reading Mandy. It's not something that I think people would be like, yep, make the connection instantly, but it exists.
Yes. There's all that out there, and you never know who's seeing you. And people come from all over the world to the San Diego convention and come up and see me, and I'm always happy to find some new country that people happen to know me in. And one guy came up. I hope that all these things sound like my head is this big, but honestly, it's because
it's okay. It's okay. It's much larger. We know.
They're just amazing to me. And this guy came up, and he was from India, and he said, "Oh yes, I love your work." And he said, "Oh well, thank you." He said, "I'm glad to know that somebody in India knows my work." And he said, "Oh sir, you are a god in India." People do tend to overdo how much they like you at times,
But I think that exists because I'm going to throw up another image here, because you've also done Red Sonja and you've done this cover, and obviously this is very similar to how Mandy is done. And I don't know if this is a direct Mandy reference, but even this idea of why people really like you and people love Mandy, it's also you're involved in so many other mediums that I think people catch on to Mandy and they're like, oh, Dean, you also worked on this book and this book. And then they find out you did the Honey Nut Cheerio bee. And that all adds to what you have accomplished. And it's going to
I should say, in that respect, I worked for Dark Horse. I did the Gremlins comic, which was Gremlins was a thing that was owned by Disney and so forth, and it was done as a book.
You brought it back. You brought it back.
Well, I didn't. They did, but they wanted to do a new comic of it, and they went to Disney, and Disney said, "Oh, well, we don't own that," and they were told, "Oh, yeah, you do." Take a look, check your files. You own the Gremlins, and so we did a series. We did three comic books, the same storyline, and I was only able to do two of them because I didn't have the time to do the third one. But I designed the characters, and I drew them, and I did basically all of it. I didn't do the color, but I did it in pencil, which is how I work. I didn't have an inker. I didn't do it in ink, but it worked out, and so that was a fun thing to do.
Well, your pencils are good, and so we're thrilled that we got the Gremlins back to some degree, and that Dark Horse was thrilled to do it as well. And obviously that's super important. And then obviously you've also done this book, and I love this book, and I just love the cover on it, which is the Dreamland Chronicles. And obviously I just love that cover on it, because I think that cover is magnificent. I love the background fairies of the front center fairy, and it's right my cup of tea as far as cover work goes. And I just love the style because it's different than some of your other things that you've done.
Yeah, she's almost Mandy, but it was, you know, sometimes people are working on a character that has pigtails and is blonde or something, and suddenly
I love pigtails like that too.
Yeah,
There's a wrestler called Alexa Bliss, and when she has pigtails like that, I love it. I love it. It's phenomenal. But anyhow, I digress right there.
Well, just so you know that they didn't steal Mandy from me, and I didn't steal that character for Mandy. It was just happened, you know.
No. I'm not accusing anybody of anything.
Of course not. Of course not.
I would never, ever present that. You know, I'm not that loose. Maybe a few beers in, maybe, but I'm not that loose yet. I want to make that clear. And then we're going to talk about my favorite company, and I sort of tip my hat a little bit, and that's Zenescope and this cover. And I just love the monkey flying Dorothy away on the yellow brick road with Dorothy's panties exposed.
Yes.
Yeah, I just love it. And that was by Blue Griffin, from my understanding. And they were the company that sort of did an exclusive with Zenescope. I happen to know a lot about Zenescope. I'm not too sure. Probably Anthony Spey might have booked this, or Raven Gregory, or Dave Franchini, or Ralph Tedesco booked this cover. I don't know. It's one of those four. And I know all of those people's minds because I interviewed Ralph. So I can openly say that. And obviously what was going on with this cover, because this is the last one I want to talk about as far as comics, because I love Zenescope and I love this cover. And it's not that expensive on eBay, so I could afford it.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, these are all fun things to do, and you know, it comes up once in a while. I don't look for that sort of thing. I don't look for clients to have because you know, sometimes you don't want clients anymore.
But even the idea to work for a company like Zenescope, because at that point, Zenescope was still new. I think this was 2013. It's Oz issue 3, I want to say. And Zenescope's been around for maybe 8-9 years. And so they're starting to get their footing very, very well. Obviously, Wonderland was a big deal in the comic world for them. And getting to work for a cool company like them and getting to do a cover, and, you know, I don't know if it's a bucket list for people, but there's so many good artists that have gone through Zenescope and gone on to bigger and better things. And it's very cool as a Zenescope fan that somebody like you also in there. And it's kind of just like saying, oh, you know, you only did one cover for them, but you also got to do something very cool. And as a fan, it's very cool because you're a very good American cartoonist. And you're a legendary animator in a lot of ways. And now you're also now part of this company's history to some degree. And it's just very cool when you start figuring out who has worked for Zenescope. And that's why I wanted to highlight that, because that is a company that has grown massively in the last 15 years. They're on year 16, and they are a serious contender as a company in the comic realm right now.
Yeah, and I have to say, one thing too about the conventions, you know, you get seen by so many people at the conventions, particularly San Diego, and so you get to know all kinds of people. And I also go to the CTN convention, the animation convention, which is also not happening right away. We've done these things online. That's, of course, not the same. But
It's not as fun.
The idea of shaking hands with a couple of thousand people and having them breathe on you during the pandemic was probably a good idea not to do that. But at any rate, I had a lot of friends do Mandy for one of my books too. I had all kinds of people, including Bill Stout, and well, let me show that one to you.
Yes, the selling hour. I love it.
That was this one. the Mandy Gallery, and I had Sergio Aragonis did one for me, of course, the Mad magazine. I had my ex-partner Nancy Beeman did one. J. Scott Campbell did one. R.C. Harvey, Herval. I don't know.
So what is that like, getting Campbell to do a picture / commission / pinup of Mandy? Because everybody knows J. Scott Campbell.
Oh yeah,
and it's awesome when a big artist like Campbell comes in and gets to do stuff too, and his interpretation of it.
This one here. No, this one.
I was about to say, flying superhero Mandy is not Campbell.
No, that
is J. Scott Campbell right there.
Well, this is Nathan Greeno, and Nathan Greeno, I sort of helped get into Playboy magazine as a cartoonist because he was the director, one of the two directors of Tangled for Disney, and he's a terrific animation director and so forth. But so all these people were instantly, okay, sure, I'll do this for you. And, it's just, cartoonists are wonderful people.
I agree. And obviously my background with cartoonists is Bob Fingerman, Howard Cruz, Dennis Kitchen. And obviously I love cartoonists and I love political cartoonists. I've had a conversation with Rosa Fleming, and that's a whole different conversation, and how we met and how we had a conversation in a very interesting event at a bar while I was waiting for Dave Rubin to take a picture with. But that's a whole different discussion about political cartoons and freedom of speech and all fun stuff with that.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, everything you've done, between animation and illustrations and comics, I just love everything you've done, and the fact that you have reinvented yourself and that you have gone from animation, and I think you do a little bit of animation here and there at this point, but obviously
it comes up, or at least design for characters and so forth. But there's not too much 2D being done, and I haven't gotten into.
It's a lost art. It's a lost art.
It's what? I'm sorry.
It's a lost art, 2D animation.
There are still people that can do it, and I'm hoping that, the French do it, the Japanese do it, and so it's out there, and there are people that are doing it.
There's an amazing French animation movie called April in the Extraordinary World. And that is arguably some of the best animation and best 2D animation that's ever been produced in the last probably 20 to 30 years, which is amazing. And it's got a phenomenal cast. And it's got an A-list starred cast out there in it. It's unbelievable. And it's some of the best 2D animation.
Strangely enough, I haven't heard of this. What's the name of it?
April and the Extraordinary World. It's got J.K. Simmons, Paul Giamatti, Susan Sarandon's in it, and a few other people are in it, and it's unbelievable. I think it came out in 2016, I want to say, and it's a phenomenal movie. It's $10 in Blu-ray on Amazon right now, and it's beyond underrated. It's cheaper to buy it than rent it, and it's a phenomenal movie, and the American cast is phenomenal about it, and it's French. And it's amazing. And then the basic premise is that if all the scientists were kidnapped by aliens and we're still in that steam era where everything is running on steam engines, what would the world look like? And then there you go. And then it's super interesting. And then it's about this adventure. It's phenomenal. But I digress.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I will have that shortly.
So having said all that, and obviously, it sort of leads into where I want to go, because you've been around for almost 40 plus years in the industry, between animation, illustrations, comics, character designs. And what do you feel is the biggest changes in the industry? Because obviously, all of those industries have changed. COVID has forced a change as well. And where do you even think this is going? Because it is evolving very rapidly on how people consume things, how people want things, and even what can be done. Because I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that Mandy could have been done in the 1970s the way it's being done today, and it's distributed.
No, only if only because nobody would know who she was. It would have been very tough to get her seen anywhere. I could have done it for Playboy in the 70s if I had thought to try. But as you say, it's the internet is the whole thing that opened the world for everything. And it's where people that you don't know and you can't imagine have seen your work, and it's just and that of course has changed everything too. It has given again, well, computers themselves spawned the CD-ROMs, which became on the internet instead, and everything has changed. The biggest thing for me was the end of 2D animation as a ongoing thing. It's still, whenever I see anybody do animation or I see a pencil test from somebody, it just gets me, because it's the artist's hand. You're seeing the actual drawing moving. In a way, that's what made me love the 101 Dalmatians so much. It was the first one that was done Xerox, and a lot of people didn't like that. But I did, because it looked like pencil line in it, and I knew it was the drawings. It was, of course, Disney always had assistants and in-betweeners and cleanup people. But you could always tell who the animator was on any given character, because you'd seen their work in all the other things too. But it was like a pencil line. And anyway, I'm hoping that will come back. That there will. There's no reason why it shouldn't, except that the studios themselves think that everything's got to be computer animated now. Disney thinks it, and once Disney thinks it, that pretty much means everybody's got to think it. But it's as I say, it's done in France, it's done in Japan, it's done in China probably. Animation has been done all over the world, and I've seen a lot of it from the past. You don't get to see much from the future. You have to, from the future.
Yes. We have superpowers.
You see it from the future, but it's tough to find. But I'm hoping it's still there. And I know there are plenty of animators who did it and could do it again, and we'll see what happens.
And then I'm also curious, because I would like to see 2D animation. I'm a big anime fan, so I'm a little bit spoiled on that front. I'm also a big, I love DC's animation, like DC Comics' animation. That's a lot of 2D work, especially like Batman the Animated Series is sort of the go-to show for my generation. And Batman Beyond as well was very good on that front. So I think it can be done as well, and it can be done amazingly if necessary, and if they wanted to put money behind it. But I am curious, because obviously I haven't gone to a con in over 15 months as a fan, and I present on a variety of topics, and I'm pretty sure you're similar to me in not going to a convention due to COVID. And so where do you think those are going? Because things are starting to come back, but I feel like it's going to be very much trial and error on where things are going and how they're going to change, because I don't think cons are going to want to have the same number of people there, or there's going to have to be some type of safety protocol, because con crud was real before, and with infectious diseases and it being on everybody's radar, I don't think a con wants to be known as the con that we got everybody sick at this convention type of con.
Yeah. Well, it always amazed me that over the many years that I've been going to San Diego and to well, all over the world.
Nobody's
I
dying.
haven't caught anything. I've never caught anything, obviously, at any of those places, because you're actually in touch with people, and they're actually, that far away from your face talking to you.
And it's not just one person, it's many, it's hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah, but we'll have to see what happens. But it's hard to see that not only will the people that are running the con, they'll have to get back and say, okay, it's all right now, you can come. Will people want to come? That's the question.
It's the question I've been asking for the past year, and then like I think 3 months or the last 15 months, I've been asking this question to over almost 200 people at this point, and everybody has a different answer, and I have no idea. And from my personal standpoint, I'm fully vaccinated, and I'm waiting till the dust settles. That's just how I feel, because I don't know how things are going to look, and I think that's where a lot of people are at saying, hey, I want to come back, but how does this look? I just got an invitation from a con that they're looking for panelists to present, and that they don't have enough panelists who are doing it because I'm a fan panelist, and they don't have enough of us to present. And that's an indicator to me in certain circumstances where people are saying, look, I don't know how I feel 100% about diving back, not to mention that legitimately every con is going to be happening in August now, which is a whole different ballgame. There's a weekend that, and I know it's because of the indie scene, that legitimately like 10 of my friends have to make a choice between going to 8 different cons to have a table at. And I'm like, that's a good and a bad problem, because that means that now every con is competing with 8 other conventions.
Yeah. Well, that often happened even before, that a lot of them were in May. April and May, I'd get
not at the level
invited to some,
Not at the level of 8. No, and I'm not even joking. There's 8 cons going on in the same weekend, every single week, and in August. That is insane. And they might be like 100 miles apart from each other, which is even crazier, which it means they're all doable within each other. And then, it's a clusterfuck.
Yeah, it's just, it's hard to know. It's hard to know. As far as animation goes and people in animation, it hasn't been as bad as for an awful lot of people, because we can work at home. Even the big studios allow people to work at home.
And the voice actors are very happy about that, because most of them have a home studio anyway. They're like, I don't have to show up for work. Wonderful.
Voice actors over the phone. We used to, where some well-known actor and we needed them for a voice for a commercial, we could do it over a phone line and get it done. But there was, it's just hard to know what's going to happen and who's going to want to go, and it doesn't work online. Let's face it.
It doesn't work in which there has to be a human connection. I'm not.
Keep it going that way just so people remember that it exists at all. But people can't see everything you've got. And like, I take in portfolios full of sketches that I've done for the books, or just doodles, that I'll eventually use for something. And I have like 4 portfolios of those that people can sit and stand and look through and buy at the conventions, but I can't put 300 drawings online for everybody to see and choose. And I have to, if they ask me, I can send them 50 and here, see what you like. But otherwise, people just can't see all you've got. So
I agree. And you have a bunch of stuff even in your books, and the fact that when somebody's at a convention, you know, you can make a personal connection with somebody and then they buy a bunch of your stuff and you could sell them on a bunch of your books, or you could have all the books out and somebody says, oh, I really like the cover on this and I'm probably gonna like everything else. And online, it's a little bit different. So it's very, very, very different online. And I'm an online guy. My show is online, but I definitely know when I go to conventions and some people know who I am, it's a very different experience. And I've had conversations with people for like 30 minutes and I don't have a table. We're just talking outside of like my room that I just presented in about a bunch of stuff. So I miss it a lot, but I don't loathe missing it. But I digress there. And since we're talking about online, obviously I want to give you a chance for self-promotion. So where can people find you online? I know you got a website. Obviously, where can people buy your things? Because there's a bunch of stuff you can buy between statues, the books, some other things. I don't know if people can hit you up for commissions. That's a big thing. I don't know if you got some.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what I've been doing for a year and a half, is people writing me for commissions, and I'll go through some things. I always send a sketch first to them, and if that's okay, then I do the final piece. But they're all different sizes and different prices, and
and you're pretty open as far as commissions on ideas and things like that for the most part. Where some people want to commission a Mandy in a bikini, you're pretty open to that. Versus somebody says, "Hey, I want her in a sundress," or if I want, you know, possibly another character, I'm pretty sure you're open to that as well.
Yeah, it all depends on. I mean, I have things I won't do. I imagine you can imagine what people might
like
want
the X-Men,
to
right?
do, huh? Like
the X-Men, right?
Well, yeah, but no, there are people that don't understand how far I will go in, you know, is nude more often than not. But that's just nudity. There's nudity on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. You know, there's nudity and there's nudity. So it's
so topless Mandy is fine, but then there's something where going hardcore nudity is a different line.
Yeah.
If you would draw a Mandy where she's holding her bikini in her hand and you know her breasts are exposed, that's a lot different than a hardcore scene of being drawn.
Yeah.
There's a line, clearly.
There's a line. And there was, even when I was doing stuff for Playboy, sometimes Hefner would send me something that was written by somebody, and would you do this? And I'd say, it's not my style. And that was always okay with him. All right, okay. It's just you know, a little too over the edge. I balance on a knife edge of you know.
So you take the Zenescope approach to nudity, where it has to be done tasteful, but they don't do anything full frontal and they don't do anything hardcore. And some artists are perfectly fine with that, some are not. Obviously, I have a feeling you would, if somebody wanted a Batman commission, I'm pretty sure you're open to that.
Maybe not Batman himself. I mean, I'm not a superhero guy.
You get where I'm going with it, though, meaning that
I will dress Mandy as Batgirl if you want.
Fair enough.
A lot
if
of
somebody says, "Hey, draw me Van Helsing, a female Van Helsing," you're pretty open to that idea.
Yeah, there's lots of possibilities, and
I'm trying to sell people commissions here.
Yes.
Work with me.
I've had people ask me to do just animals, and that's perfectly fine with me. That's most of what I did through my whole career was animal. Once I started to work for Playboy, I realized I've got to go back to figure drawing sessions again and make sure I know what I'm drawing. So.
So on that note, though, I mean, there's also a bunch of books, and so how can people get a bunch of that stuff? Because I want people to buy your merchandise. I know certain statues are sold out. I know that they move very quickly, and obviously there are things that sell out. There are some statues that are still available. There's all these different books that are available with Mandy, and then there's a variety of other products as well. So where can people get all that stuff, and how do they get a hold of either you or another place where it could be bought? Because I know that sometimes different people fulfill different things with this. I know there's a really big Mandy statue that's like a $300 one. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll show it to you.
Even better. We should have turned this into the sales hour.
That's right. Yeah, here she is. And she's nude too.
Exactly. But tastefully nude. And
Yes.
that's what, like 17 inches, I think?
Yeah, if she stood up, well, she's about 12 inches sitting. But if she stood up, I figured she'd be about 17 inches. She'd be that much higher.
Yeah.
It would be nice. This was done by a sculptor called Chuck Williams, who used to work for Disney. He did a lot of sculptures for various, I guess mostly princesses, but he does all kinds of stuff.
And so where can people buy that if they're interested in the other books? Because I don't think we tackled that yet. And I know that.
Just contact me. I don't have a store as such online to go to. If you just email me, and I'll show you what I've got. And you can go to my cagedbeagle.com website. Caged Beagle being as I said, my original company.
Links up above, everybody. Links up above in the descriptions, or on YouTube. It's down below for those who are interested.
Okay. And it's just a matter of writing to me, and on that, you can see a lot of the pieces of the books, pages from the books. You can see the sculptures and so forth. I try to put them up there when I think about it. And otherwise, just email. My email is on there as well, on that page, cagedbeagle.com.
And so obviously, I enjoy Mandy. I enjoy your comic work. I enjoy all the animation. Obviously, I was partially exposed to some of your commercials, and others I looked up. And obviously, I know the Honey Nut Cheerio bee, which is awesome in many ways. And I do want to say this because it is important to say it. You have to support artists that you enjoy and you enjoy their work. What that means, first and foremost, is you have to support them financially, and that means buying their products, getting commissions, saying hello to them at cons, picking up a book, a sculpture, a statue, a print if there are prints. If you want the banner, I don't know if that's for sale for the fourth one, but I'm sure there's a price. I'm sure there's a price for everything. So obviously, if you want something relating to Mandy, obviously contact Dean, and I'm sure that you can work something out. But also times are tough right now. And I understand that COVID has wrecked a lot of people's lives. It has put financial stress on other people. And the best thing that you can do if you can support economically is support through social media. Share Mandy, follow Twitter, check out Facebook pages, tell a friend. Obviously, just check out the website. Keep it in the back of your head, favorite it, because it does make a difference and it is super important. And also, if you are not necessarily can't afford to buy something with Mandy at the moment, but somebody who might be interested, or just tell a friend, they might be able to do it. And then therefore they might be like, oh, this is great. And I didn't even know this existed. And same thing with the comic stuff. If you're a comic fan and you know that you have friends who are interested in covers, send them a picture to one of these covers that I showed you. And that's also important as well, because you never know. Or even just share it on social media and see, oh, snap, who checks out this cover, and then something like, who's that artist? And then there you go. So that is an amazing way how to support. But obviously, first and foremost, if you have the extra cash, you should be buying merch, because it does make a difference. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word on what you want to tell people, or anything you would like to say beyond that. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, as I say, I'm asked by students very often how to get into the business and so forth. And as I say, nobody that you ask that is going to have a story that you can just follow. You can't take a template from somebody and say, I'll do exactly what they did, because what they did might not exist anymore. So keep your eyes open. But by all means, if you love to draw, draw and keep drawing, and have enough what should I say? Understand how good you are at something, and don't overdo it, but don't give up on yourself either, because you've got to. It takes years to learn. You have to keep drawing. You have to keep, and compare yourself to other people, but keep your own style. And otherwise, come to my website and buy things.
And I couldn't have said that any better myself. So I'd like to say thank you to you, obviously, Dean Yeagle, for being on. I believe it is super important, and I appreciate everybody who comes onto this show. So thank you for coming on. Obviously, I'm a big fan, and I'm probably going to wind up spending a bunch of money when I get my paycheck in a week with on some of the things you have out there, preferably the books. So I'm throwing that out. So if you see an email in a week or two from me, obviously we know that my paycheck is
coming. Just Google me, by the way. Just if you forget everything I've told you, just Google me. You'll find stuff.
Don't even bother to listen to anything else.
Just Google me. You'll see my stuff. Yeah.
Well, on that note, I believe that is a wrap.
Okay.